What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, it's time for another player breakdown video. This week, we're going over the draft decision between Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Johnathan Taylor. If you have any suggestion as to what you want to see next week, put it in the comment section below. We're probably going to be looking at like the wide receiver position, but you got any suggestions, all are welcome. So we'll start this one off with Bijan Robinson, taken 8th overall by the Falcons this season. I've already seen plenty of comments saying you cannot draft him in round 1, can't be drafting a rookie that early. You know, the biggest comment that I've seen is people comparing him to Clyde, being like, because Clyde was, of course, a first-round pick in fantasy, gets taken in the, I believe it was the last pick in the first round by Kansas City. We all know how that ended, did not work out. Something I want to make very clear is that these are wildly different situations. Clyde's ADP was entirely landing spot dependent. He was the last pick in the first round, or like one of the last picks in the first round. So significantly lower. I know it doesn't feel like it, but significantly lower draft capital than 8th overall. It's a much higher investment. And he wasn't nearly as good of a prospect as Bijan is. I mean, my model compared Clyde Edwards-Helaire to DeAndre Swift to Devin Singletary. That's who it kind of thinks he should be comped with. Whereas Bijan is comped with Miles Sanders and Adrian Peterson. But again, all situation, right? Clyde got hype because he was a drafted running back, a relatively highly drafted running back to Kansas City. And we just figured, well, any running back can be highly productive in that offense. And so even if, everyone knew that Johnathan Taylor was the better prospect talent-wise, it didn't matter because it was landing spot. It was just such a good spot. This one is completely different. There is almost no chance that Bijan Robinson is bad. And so his only path to busting is really if just like the Falcons offense is awful. And maybe like people are actually using that as an excuse as to why you can't draft him that high. And it's like, maybe that does happen because I'm not going to throw it out as a possibility. But look at the other two teams we're debating about here, right? It's the Falcons, the Colts, and the Giants. Those are the three teams that have the stud running back that we're ranking in this video. Among those three, Atlanta finished first in scoring, first in running back touches, actually ranking 4th in the entire league, first in running back touchdowns, first in running back red zone points per game, and first in running back points per game overall, half PPR scoring. And that was with a combination of Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier at running back, not Saquon Barkley and Johnathan Taylor. So in terms of situation, Bijan actually lands on the best spot among these three, and that's before even considering the Falcons have by far the best offensive line among these three teams. The only argument you can make against Bijan is, well, maybe he won't get the touches. Maybe they will lean on Algier, on Patterson, players like that. But to be honest, that in itself is a pretty weak argument. I mean, since 2000, there have been 16 running backs taken with a top 10 pick. These running backs averaged over 250 touches, with 31% of them having their best or like tied for their best season of their career. Some players had within a few yards, exact same amount of touchdowns, tied for the best year. So that is pretty good. 31% of them peaked as a rookie. So if anything, we should be expecting Bijan to have one of, if not the best season of his career as a rookie. And those numbers are also taking into account some of those running backs just got hurt in their first year. They may have had their best season in that year. And we can definitely say that, again, Falcons' best landing spot, best environment for running backs when we're comparing to the Colts and the Giants. And because of that, and because of how confident I am, my model is, the projections are that Bijan is going to be a stud. I think he's pretty clearly first on this list. And so I think the remainder of this video should focus on Barkley versus Johnathan Taylor, because that's really close. Like, that one is a very difficult decision. I don't think it should really be a decision. Bijan should be the first drafted running back among these three. So on to Barkley. Saquon will be entering his 6th season in the NFL, having turned 26 this February. His best season by far was as a rookie. He had 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, but he's coming off his 2nd best season as a pro. Last year, he gained 1,650 yards, 10 touchdowns, and played in 16 games, which a lot of people were saying he couldn't do because of injuries. Kind of proves those people wrong. One noteworthy point about last season was it was a little bit of a split year. I wouldn't say that like he was bad over the second half, but there was a clear difference in his volume and his efficiency. Over the first 9 games of the season, he averaged over 25 touches per game for about 125 yards, which is about 5 yards per touch. Over the final 9 games, he averaged 9 fewer touches per game for 45 fewer yards, 4.75 yards per touch. So efficiency goes down, volume goes way down. He was pretty clearly worse over the second half of the season, and it seemed like the Giants knew that. One weird thing, though, was like he was efficient in the playoffs. I mean, if you were watching him run, like he had burst, he looked good. You look at his final numbers, he was efficient in the playoffs. But even in those 2 games, he only had 9 carries in each. So I don't want to say a little bit weird because, again, the efficiency was falling off later in the year. Maybe they were concerned with the production, but slightly concerning, right? That he was seeing so much less volume. So 26 years old now, supposed to be kind of like right in the sweet spot of where running back production will peak for most players, but also everyone's career arc is going to be different. And so it's possible that maybe he's a little bit on the downward trend now. And it's at least fair to question if he has the same touch ceiling as Johnathan Taylor. I mean, through 5 seasons, Barkley's never hit 300 carries. We do have a season where Johnathan Taylor had 372 touches. He has 299 plus carries in every single one of his years in college, all 3 years. Saquon's never done that, right? And believe me, like I understand that targets are worth more than carries. And so it's okay that Saquon Barkley just doesn't match the carry ceiling that Johnathan Taylor has because he's got a higher target ceiling. And so it does really make up for that difference. But it's worth noting that historically, teams have been more confident overloading Johnathan Taylor with touches. He's had this 1 year with the injuries, but throughout his entire career, it's been the 1 year. Let's not pull the same thing that we did with Saquon Barkley the year before. Just that, we know Taylor can handle more touches than Saquon. That's just been proven over the years consistently. Even last year, getting injured was a 6th straight year for Johnathan Taylor, at least 220 touches. He can handle more touches than Saquon. And so if we're looking at ceiling, maybe that is one thing we could point out and say that it is possible that, Saquon was trending towards a dominant season of touches, but the Giants pulled back and were like, he's not going to be able to handle the amount, or is already breaking down, handle the amount that we were kind of giving him. So just one brief thing there and saying the ceiling for touches probably a little bit higher for Taylor. But ultimately, I don't think that's enough to push the decision either way. I think the number one question you have to answer when you're trying to rank these 2 players is which one of these factors is going to hurt that team's running back more? Is it Anthony Richardson being the quarterback for the Colts this season? I'm going to assume for this, he starts in week 1. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't start, early in the season. Whether it's week 1, 2, 3, not going to make a huge difference, right? Richardson just being the quarterback this season for the Colts. Or is it the Giants adding in Darren Waller and then having the worst offensive line between these 2, one of the worst offensive lines likely in the league? You could argue that Hyatt is also a negative for Saquon, But then you could argue that, well, he opens up the offense a little bit. He won't be a target hog, so it's not like, Saquon can't get targets. Maybe defenses have to respect the speed. It just helps Saquon a little bit in the efficiency game. I don't think it moves the needle really too much either way. I wouldn't factor that in too much. And then you could also look on the other side and say, well, Josh Downs, does he steal some of that short area work from Johnathan Taylor? Again, not when I'm expecting to have some huge impact where it's like, oh, look, Josh Downs is going off. Now Johnathan Taylor is bad in fantasy. I don't think the Hyatt and the Downs additions really matter. I think it's really which is worse, Richardson being added to the Colts or Waller being added to the Giants with also having a bad offensive line. And in my eyes, I think the move to Richardson has more of a potential to hurt Johnathan Taylor. It's not a lock to happen, and I'm not avoiding Taylor by any means, but in terms of which running back could perform a lot worse than expected, I think there's just more unknown with how Taylor is going to respond with Richardson at quarterback. Like, Richardson is obviously a hypermobile quarterback, the most athletic quarterback we have ever seen. He is going to take carries between the 20s, but also going to take a lot of red zone carries, potentially a lot of goal line carries. And that's a huge source of production for Johnathan Taylor, is these carries inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line, that whenever they got close, you knew that's where the ball was going, and he was getting so many fantasy points from that when he was really peaking in production. If some of those, and potentially a lot of those, are now going to Anthony Richardson, well, that's definitely going to hurt. Then you add in the fact that we know these hypermobile quarterbacks don't throw it as much to running backs. We don't really know what Richardson's going to do, if he's going to throw a lot of dump offs or not. But our guess is that this is a downgrade. And you can say that Daniel Jones is mobile as well, but he's not as mobile as Richardson. And we've seen Daniel Jones and Barkley connect. We haven't seen that with Richardson and Taylor. So it's like, it could happen, but it's not likely to happen at a very high degree. And so it's another downgrade. And then if you wanted to throw in Evan Hull, I wouldn't blame you. Again, Johnathan Taylor is obviously a lot better than Evan Hull, but Evan Hull was a really, really good receiving back in college. I wouldn't be shocked if they wanted him on the field in some third downs, again, hurting the ceiling for Johnathan Taylor. Meanwhile, you look at Saquon, you look at Waller coming in there. I think there's a chance Waller has like the highest target share on this team, but I also think that's more likely to impact the wide receivers, maybe just kind of cap all of their upsides. And while the offensive line being bad is not good, obviously, for Saquon, it's not like they were amazing last season. Like, they're not going from top 5 to bottom 5. So I don't think that's a huge difference. And it's not like the Colts got better, right? The Colts got worse too. The Colts also aren't that great of an offensive line. Is there a world where the Colts have a worse offensive line than the Giants? Maybe. And so I really think just the risk in moving to a rookie quarterback, paired with that rookie quarterback being the most athletic we've ever seen, going to take a lot of carries, potentially a lot of touchdowns, I think that's a bigger risk. And then you look at just like the icing on the cake, if that maybe has them still even for you. If we look at points per game from last season for these offenses, like who has the most to make up? It's the Colts, right? I mean, the Colts were, along with Denver, like Denver was the only team that had fewer points per game than last season. Compared to the Falcons, the Giants, they were around league average. And so it's like the Colts have a lot of work to do to be an offense where you really want their starting running back on. Like, it's just not good. When the offense is only scoring 17 points per game, that's not a lot of touchdowns. You need a huge touchdown share as a running back to have, first round value in fantasy. So it's just easier if you've got, at least an average to a slightly above average offense, easier for the touchdowns to come, for the production to flow in fantasy. We don't really know where the Colts are going to be, but they were so bad last season. Having a rookie quarterback added to that, we don't know. We don't know how good they're going to be. Again, that's even more risk. I think I like my ranking: Bijan, Saquon, Johnathan Taylor. If you want to know the exact projection, it's Bijan, 310 carries, 34 receptions, over 1,775 yards, and then 12.4 touchdowns. It's good for about 15.6 half PPR points per game. Saquon, second, 271 carries, 52 receptions, over 1,500 yards, 13.6 touchdowns, 15 half PPR points per game. And then in third, Johnathan Taylor, 294 carries, 33 receptions, 1,730 yards, 8.8 touchdowns, coming in at 14 points per game. So that'll do it for this week's player breakdown. If you have a breakdown you want to see next week, put it in the comment section below. Upvote the responses you agree with. I'll be back tomorrow to go over my favorite wide receivers, Saturday to talk about the players rising up draft boards the most, and then Sunday to talk about a draft strategy project I did this offseason. That, my friends, is in this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button? How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.